Welcome to episode 162 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week we play Hi-Fi Rush. Let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have four friends with me. The first friend, you know her, you love her. Her name is Flora Marigold.
These pigeons are the source of my discontent.
Our second friend, on for the second time, Adam Gumbert. Hello.
I love classical music.
Our fourth friend, back for the second time as well, Brenden Groom.
I didn't know I needed a fun catchphrase. I don't have one. I'm not clever. Play more indie games.
There it is. Love it.
It's a good catchphrase.
And for the first time, we have Mr. Michael Higham. Hello.
You know what time it is. About time. I'm on this with you, Jacob. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Today we're talking about Hi-Fi Rush. But before we get into that, we're going to do something that we do for our brand new guests. We're doing the Gauntlet, which is a small little segment where we ask some questions to our new guests to learn a little bit more about their tastes and what got them into gaming. So, Michael, are you ready for the gaming Gauntlet?
Damn, I didn't know what I expected. I got a question for y'all before we get into this.
Ooh, reverse Gauntlet.
Is this a clean podcast? How clean is this?
This is a PG podcast, but if you swear, don't worry.
Okay, cool. I feel like over the years I've learned to ask that before I get into things because I've been in some sticky situations. But okay, I got you.
Yeah, do you want to explain those sticky situations?
No, because that would make this go over a PG podcast. So
there it is. There it is. Well, that's your question. We have questions for you. Yes. Are you ready for them?
Yes, I am.
What is your earliest gaming memory?
Earliest gaming memory, playing NBA Jam at my grandma's house in New York. That was the earliest, yeah. Yep.
So what team did you play on NBA Jam?
Supersonics. I was a Sonics fan because I liked their colors, and I was a Gary Payton fan. I got into basketball because of video games, and from there it's like, Gary Payton's my guy, the glove, that fool. Because in NBA, his stealing rating was so high. And like when I started playing NBA Live, so I'd just be swiping fools on the court and easy money. I tossed the Sean Kemp, 3, easy money. There it is.
Do you play it if you ever see it in arcades?
I do. Yeah, it's if it's in an arcade, I'll post up. And because I don't know, I love this. There's still that satisfaction in, jumping 20 feet in the air and slamming that thing. So NBA Jam is, that is my earliest gaming memory. Maybe not my fondest. I would say probably Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, which I beat like 30 times because it was one of the few games that I had growing up. So,
Brenden, do you have a physical copy that you're pulling right now?
Let's go. For the audio listeners, Brenden Groom is holding up.
Oh, that's
pristine
copy. Dish.
Ooh, the Japanese version too. Yeah, let's go. Oh. It's Famicom.
Sicko hours.
What a treat.
Yeah.
What game do you think you've spent the most hours on, Michael?
Final Fantasy 14. Are you kidding me?
Of course.
I punched in /playtime on it, which reads back to you how long you've been logged on.
Uh-huh.
So they asked me this on the Kind of Funny Games cast when I was talking about my preview for Final Fantasy 16. And that thing came back and said 268 days.
No. Days?
I think almost half that is me idling and Limsa Lominsa just chilling. So I don't think I've been actually playing that, but still, I think I have at least a solid 2,000 plus hours of actually playing that game. So
yeah, because that's 6,400 hours. So
yeah, that's a lot of time.
2 more questions. What's your favorite console generation?
That's tough. I would probably, if you ask me, I thought about this more recently, especially in the past year and this year. Is I'm leaning towards this current generation just because of how it's been able to capture all the previous generations as well. I think about Metroid Prime Remastered is kind of like the thing that flipped me over, where it's like, oh, I can have all console generations on this generation. And especially with things like being re-released on the Switch, it kind of changes how I view a lot of those games. But if I were to, probably my still solid answer would be like the PS2, Xbox, GameCube era, because I think that's like where games started to really find. That was a generation where I think developers kind of figured things out, where the PS1 N64 generation was still kind of experimental, first time going into like 3D games, fully 3D games. So there was a lot of growing pains and a lot of things that developers learned, which kind of, and when you go into the PS2 generation, is like the full realization of what those games are what games are capable of, especially in the RPG space. As someone who grew up loving RPGs, who was raised on RPGs, some of the highest highs were in that era. Then you go into the HD era was cool, but I think that's when games started to follow trends a lot more closely, which is all good and fine. But I do like the sort of experimental, or the ability for developers to be weird. Like there's a lot of weird PS2 RPGs that I'm just getting around to now, and I'm like, wow, this is kind of forward thinking. It's either forward thinking or it's janky as hell, and both have their charms. And I really love that about that specific era of games.
So you're saying that we would never get Guitar Man or Mr. Mosquito on modern consoles?
I don't. Maybe, but those things were expected back then, so it's a little tougher to find those nowadays.
Last question for you before we jump into Hi-Fi Rush. We have a debate on this podcast between which Mario brother is superior. Some of the cast picks Mario, most of the cast picks Luigi. What is your favorite Mario brother and why?
My favorite Mario brother. Is Wario a brother, or is Wario like a cousin?
I think he's more of a cousin.
Okay, all right.
He'd be in like the Fast and Furious if that was a movie. He'd be like in the family, in the familia.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't be a brother.
Yeah, so like Vin Diesel, like Mario's definitely Vin Diesel. Wario's probably The Rock. And they've had their differences on and off screen, so it's not exactly a cozy relationship. There's still some contention there, but I would probably go with Mario. That's an easy one. I think just by virtue of him being, I got a lot of love and respect for Luigi. Don't get me wrong. That dude's got a home. That fool's got 3 mansions. So I respect Luigi. I just wish that the Mario Luigi Superstar Saga, or that RPG series, kind of like really put Luigi on the map. I feel like, but Mario's been through it all, and I feel like nothing phases that dude. So gotta go with Mario.
Yeah, rip Alpha Dream for Mario and Luigi. But
damn.
To everyone, like Mario brother, Flora, I know your opinion. I think I know your opinion.
Do you? Yeah.
Give me your opinion. It's Luigi, right?
I mean, Waluigi is the way to go here.
Okay.
If we're being honest.
Mario or Luigi? If you have to pick one, gun to your head, Mario or Luigi?
Luigi, yeah. I mean, he's got like the horror coward games spin-offs, like the whole mansion premise. Like that is way closer to my spirit animal than a Mario who's like seemingly like foolhardy and like gung-ho the whole way through. Like I like the guy who's willing to express the anxiety as opposed to the stubborn like I will be brave plumber.
Brendan?
I feel like it would be an assault on my true identity if I didn't say Mario, so I will happily say Mario.
Nice. Adam?
Luigi. He's tall and he can jump, so
Damn.
jumps higher than Mario.
Facts.
Love it. Well, Michael, hey, thanks again for being on the show. Brendan, Adam, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
We're going to jump in and talk about Hi-Fi Rush, developed by Tango Gameworks, published by Bethesda Softworks. It's on Windows and Xbox Series X and S. This one actually came out on January 25th of this year. So it's actually the newest game that we've ever played on the podcast, with the most amount of guests ever on the podcast. So it's going to be a fun time tonight. We start with the fast pitch, which is a 1-sentence description of the game that we're about to talk about. Who wants to give their 1-sentence pitch of Hi-Fi Rush?
Let me pull up the review from IGN. Real
Small
quick.
flex.
Let me see what they said. Oh snap! Let's see review. Oh, 9
Flora,
out
do you
of
want to go
10.
first?
Yeah, while Michael's playing that up, I'll go. For me, Hi-Fi Rush is like a delightfully refreshing return to an era of game design that, frankly, in 2023, I'm astonished that exists or was even greenlit at all.
Good. Very good. Brendan, Adam, do you want to go? Well, unless, Michael, you're ready.
I got it. Oh,
Okay.
Michael Higham. Damn, that's wild. 9 out of 10, amazing. Hi-Fi Rush marches to the beat of its own drum with stunning animation, lovable characters, and stylish rhythmic action that are anything but one note.
Love it. I love it. Anyone want to go next and take that on?
I'll be the sacrificial lamb here. Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush is Doom Eternal if you actually use the guitar.
Whoa.
Good.
Rock solid.
I would go with that. If I was an editor, I'd be like, yeah, use that.
Brendan?
So the line that I wrote on the thing that I wrote about this was Tango Gameworks new groove doesn't miss a beat, but I'm gonna say something different for the show. You're gonna get an exclusive right now.
Exclusive.
B Groom bars.
All cats in a bag of riffs.
Good.
Rock solid.
Off the dome.
Yeah, all right.
And now I have to go.
No pressure.
What? No pressure. What if Shadows of the Damned and Guitar Man had a baby that was a comic book? Hi-Fi Rush.
I'm kind of surprised none of us went for like a Sisyphean boulder reference here about like rock and roll as a pun. Is that just me? I don't know. It's probably for the best that we didn't.
What I'd love to know before we jump into the game is like what your history is maybe with rhythm games and with Tango Gameworks other games, because that's probably a good way to inform like how you felt about this one. Adam, did you want to jump in first on that one?
So I know of The Evil Within, of course, but I don't play it because I don't play scary games very often. Rhythm games, again, grew up in that era where all the Guitar Heroes, all the rock bands, during that time, anything that I know there are other rhythm games, but did I put 8,000 hours into those hero guitar band games? 100%. Absolutely. So I'm good at hitting the button when the thing comes down.
Do you still own plastic instruments?
I have one that's in a box that hasn't been unpacked in 5 moves, but it's in there somewhere.
Have you exposed your kiddo to it? That's the important question.
No, he doesn't have any rhythm. Poor kid.
Not yet, right?
Maybe later.
Not yet. Brendan, experience with Tango Gameworks and rhythm games.
I'm also a big baby boy, so no scary games for me. I do own Evil Within, and I probably played it for, I don't know, not a lot of time. And Ghostwire Tokyo also just, I don't know if that game is actually scary, but it looked scary to me, so no thanks.
Says someone who lives in Salem and repping the
Listen.
repping the witchcraft with the witch house. Yeah,
That's different than sitting in my dark
Yeah.
office with the lights off and scary things coming to say hello. I don't know. I can't do it. I'm trying to get better about it. But as far as rhythm games go, I mean, I'm a rhythm game sicko. Like the traditional stuff when it comes to like Rock Band. I was never really a big Guitar Hero person. I like the more community aspect of Rock Band just because it's like me and my buddies would always just all get together and play that. I mean, if you audio listeners, I'm sorry, but if you look behind me, you can see there's 2 Rock Band guitars in my closet. The drum set is also in there. I don't think you can see it though.
Is that an Ion drum set or a regular drum set?
It is what is the Ion one with the extra things?
Yeah.
Like
it's
cymbals?
that. Yeah, it has like a hi-hat and sort of cymbals or whatever.
Okay.
That's dope.
That's dope.
Yeah, we're Rock Band sickos for sure. But like, I love every type of rhythm game, and I love games that experiment with rhythm as a genre. Because like 2019, Cadence of Hyrule is one of my favorite games that year. I also love Crypt of the Necrodancer. I highly recommend those games whenever I can. I absolutely love them. Rhythm Heaven, another absolute banger. I mean, I've been playing rhythm games since they were available to me. Like, Parappa the Rapper is probably not a good game, but I spent a lot of time playing that game. So yeah, I heavily, not swear, get down with rhythm games.
Flora, I saw you nodding really aggressively as you pulled up your Guitar Hero guitar as well.
I'm having so much fun with this conversation, the little show and tell of our rhythm game history, because that's like what I grew up on. Yeah, I have like go-to right here for Clone Hero purposes, my little like Craigslist found brand new Guitar Hero controller.
Hell yeah.
I grew up playing it. I got rid of my PS2 like wireless one, and then randomly found what seems like the last brand new USB controller for it's great. As far as like other rhythm game exposure, like one of my favorite games of all time is Sayonara Wild Hearts, and I literally have a tattoo of that game. Like I would show and tell the leg, but that seems a little inconvenient at this point. But there's like other things like I'm so glad Cadence of Hyrule was brought up. I would have forgotten that as an example, but goodness, that was one of my favorite games. I think of 2019 when that came out.
2019.
Yeah, and then like even some more recent games like Metal Hellsinger, I had fun with. I don't think it's like an amazing game or anything, but it's just kind of fun. Anything that like wants to use music as the gimmick for the gameplay and like anchor me there with like hopefully evolving rhythm mechanics, I'm there for that. And I also resonate with a lot of the discussion so far about like the communal aspect around like Rock Band, like having your friends like physically there with you. And I've even like this sounds almost pretentious, but like I did like enter Guitar Hero competitions back in the day, like in my local area.
Yeah.
I never placed anything notable, so this is not like a moment to brag. It's just I was good enough within my friend circles that I somehow had the confidence to register at these things. So like rhythm games are deeply embedded in my soul. But then to the point about like Tango Gameworks, I think the only game I've ever played of theirs is Ghostwire Tokyo, which graphically great ray tracing thing for your hardware PC. Just incredibly boring world design and mission structure for me. I didn't click with it at all, even though I like thought that it would be like, obvious. Like I'm a diehard Yakuza fan. I thought that exploring downtown Japan from a first person perspective would be like the way to go. And it just, even despite all that buy-in, I got very little out of it. So
doesn't it have ghost cats too? Like ghost cats
like, right?
screams Flora.
Like literally, I'm a cat person. Like you would think that would be the additional. No, I got nothing out of it. I finished it. It's just it's okay.
Michael, keeping with the theme of things in your background, I noticed that you have what seems to be a guitar in your background.
Yeah, I got a Les Paul, the Paul, from my favorite guitarist Steve Choi, or he inspired me to get this kind of guitar from RX Bandits. That's my guy. But yeah, I grew up around music all my life. The only thing that's just as important as games in my life is music. So
Same.
And,
right on.
And yeah, man. Hey,
we got the right people for tonight.
Yeah, I know. And so that's manifested in me loving rhythm games right from the start. And rhythm games that's my comfort food. That's like when I'm feeling down, or if I just need to pick me up. I got so many rhythm games on deck. I've reviewed a couple of rhythm games too during my time at GameSpot. Hatsune Miku Project Diva is
sweet.
Project Diva, like, Miku and Vocaloid are transformative for me. I love Miku. I love Vocaloid so much. That game opened my eyes to a whole world of Japanese music that I wouldn't have known about otherwise. And there's a lot of like incredible artists with stunning music that has been. And I say that in my review is like Vocaloid has given a voice to the voiceless, like multi-instrumentalists who can't necessarily sing. Well, they got that Miku program on deck to sing for them, and I love those games. Such a great compilation of music. Guitar Hero was huge. I grew up playing guitar, so playing Guitar Hero was like that was a layup for me. And Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight is probably, that oh man, like whenever I feel down, I play that game and it picks me. That's my comfort game. Like at least once every. I put in like 50 hours in that game for review, but at least once a year I have a week long where that's all I play, and I just feel great afterwards. That is like the perfect pick me up right there. So yeah, rhythm games mean a lot to me, and there's some special ones out there. Miku and Persona Dancing in particular, I would say, and like for Tango Gameworks, I feel the same. I reviewed Ghostwire Tokyo when I was at Fanbyte, and exactly the same as Flora. Like. This seems like on paper this game feels like it was made for me, but something about it didn't click. It just didn't. Like I saw the seeds of something great. The execution just kind of wasn't there, which is, I mean, that's all right. That's fine. Evil Within 2 though I feel like is underrated, or at least overlooked a little bit. I think that game is great. But yeah, so got some. Shinji Mikami is obviously like one of the great developers of our time, obviously with Resident Evil and with going into Hi-Fi Rush, he has like a whole history of not horror games that he's worked on too, and that has definitely shown with John Johannes also being the director of this. Like a lot of those seeds like kind of came through, and it's like, oh wow, this is kind of surprising for Tango, but at the same time it's not. So yeah, perfect balance for me. I love stylish action. I love rhythm games. Boom, here's Hi-Fi Rush. Thank the Lord.
And correct me if I'm wrong here. Shinji Mikami was like RE4, then did Clover, God Hand, Platinum, and then went and did Tango Gameworks, right?
Yep.
Wild. That is such a wild CV.
Yeah, and then he dipped out. He dipped out of Tango most recently, right after the release of Hi-Fi Rush. And so who knows what that man is up to these days?
Yeah, I just want a sequel to Beautiful Joe. I don't think that's too much to ask.
Yeah,
Been waiting on it.
Yeah. Quickly for me, same thing. Like, I loved rhythm games growing up. You know, Guitaru Man, Parappa the Rapper. If it had a dumb peripheral like Donkey Konga, I had 4 of those because I'm an idiot.
4?
So I even played. I had 4 of them because I didn't even have 4 friends that would want to play with me, but I had 4 of them. Oh, womp womp. And then, I've not played any of Tango Gameworks games, but obviously, like, tons of Shinji Mikami's, like, background or previous games I've played. And to your point, like, I'm just super excited for what he works on next. Important thing before we talk about the game itself. I think it's really important to talk about how this game dropped, because it is not common the way it dropped. And, you know, folks might grab this podcast a year or 2 years from now to listen to it while they're playing Hi-Fi Rush. So I'd love to talk briefly about that. Does anyone want to share, like, how that game was dropped? Because it was pretty unique.
Weirdly enough, I didn't follow the Xbox sort of event that, like, shadow dropped this game. From my understanding, there was 0 marketing, which is why I was hesitant to, like, offer my thoughts on this. It came out of nowhere completely and suddenly was, like, a absolute success. But the reason I was even willing to weigh in is because I saw the residual discourse around the launch of the game, which I think is maybe more interesting than the fact that it shadow dropped in the first place. And, like, shadow drop in the sense of not, like, hopefully like a Hollow Knight Silk Song where, like, there's so much anticipation that the shadow drop, like, pays off, but, like, who the heck ever even knew this game was being developed sort of shadow dropped. And so a lot of people, at least on Twitter from my perspective, were saying things that were like sort of punditry advice about indie games and like, this is the example you have to follow, indie games. This is how you launch your game. Just don't do any marketing. Just bet on it going viral immediately. And so that discourse is actually what characterized my understanding of the game before I even gave it a chance. But my understanding is that from the get-go, this game immediately found its audience, immediately found success, and has since gone on to sell like 2 million copies in a month or something.
Yeah,
something of
2
that
million
effect.
players I think have played it.
Sure, yeah, including like Game Pass and such.
Mm-hmm. Has there been any other big title that, like, I know that games marketing is different in 2023, but like I can't recount another game that to this level that was this big that just decided to drop without any warning.
Yeah, I think it's weird because you think of AAA development. There's so many resources that go behind it, and especially for first parties, they want to be very precise and careful with their messaging, and they have big budgets behind these things. So in a way, when I step back and think about the actual process of how games are pushed in with that through the industry, it's surprising that kind of Xbox had let this happen to begin with. And of course, it's being paid off because it's letting the player experiences speak for themselves. They don't got to spend no money on that. Listen, I'm out here tweeting up a storm about Hi-Fi Rush. Xbox ain't paying me nothing. So it's and that anyone who had a positive experience with Hi-Fi Rush, that's kind of that's kind of the definition of something going viral, right? But I mean, they did have the Xbox Direct. All eyes were on Xbox because they had a pretty down year last year. So when they make a big deal about the showcase that they're having, everyone's kind of looking at them saying, all right, well, what do y'all got for this year? Because we've been waiting. And then so when you have all those eyes, the spotlight is on them. That's like the perfect moment to be like, hey, by the way, we're dropping a Game of the Year contender and it's available now. So it wasn't just that they pushed this thing out and said, all right, we hope this thing takes off. It was kind of like a great convergence of many factors that led to the spotlight being on them in that moment. So it was just like perfect timing. Like it couldn't have, the pieces couldn't have fallen into a better place for them. So there's an element of that, and like not everyone necessarily has the luxury to do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's and like Xbox. This is an Xbox first party game. This is a AAA game. So I don't want people to take the lesson away to be like, oh, we got to just do shadow drops. It's just Tango Gameworks has a lot of resources behind them to be able to pull off that sort of thing. But like props to them for pulling it off in such an amazing fashion. So it's cool. It's a treat too. And I know a lot of editorial staff were like, oh my god, this thing just shot a drop. We need someone to review the game immediately. And we have our plans for the weeks ahead, so it's hard to shift gears when suddenly this big name game drops. This happened a lot over the years at E3, where people will be like, and it's available today, and reviews editors are like, okay, who's got, I don't know, 10 hours to spare this week and another 5 hours to write a review. Like, that's tough on editorial staffs, but hey, I'm out here. So it's cool. It's really cool to see something like this happen. I don't think we're going to see this kind of thing often, but the fact that it paid off it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I kind of echo a lot of what the two of you just said. It's like this is a super unique scenario where it's Xbox Developer Direct, so everyone's all eyes on Xbox. It's January, so already, arguably the slowest month of the year. And it's in a situation where, like, this generation of consoles, like, however you want to, wherever your opinion lies, like, the truth is there's not a lot of Xbox Series XS exclusive games. And, I think all of these things kind of worked in the favor of, like, we're going to have these, I think it was 5 games or whatever it was, like 5 updates from 5 developers, blah, blah, blah. And, like, they clearly wanted to take a gamble with the marketing for this game being, the marketing is this. We're going to announce this game and release this game, and hopefully with the power of Game Pass, which is another, like, extremely useful, beneficial tool in this kind of marketing drop here, is that not only is the game available right now, but if you're in our ecosystem already, you can play it. Like, you don't have to buy it, quote unquote buy it, because you already have it. And if the game didn't get super received well right off the bat as it did, they absolutely would have spent money to do other things to, like, kind of pump this game up. You know what I mean? So I think it's less of, like, people, like, the days after when Twitter discourse turned into what it turned into, I was like, I got to back away from this because this is just not what I need to read. Like, every situation is unique. This is an extremely, extremely unique scenario. I would be shocked if we saw more games do this. I mean, Xbox, Sony, Nintendo have the luxury to do those types of things and takes those chances. I mean, Metroid Prime Remaster was rumored for a long time. They dropped that shadow drop and it shot to the top of the eShop. Michael Highams, like, best generation of games ever made. Like there's a precedent to do that stuff. Metroid's a bad example too. It's a well-established IP that people love that game. It's a remaster. I don't know. Yeah. Video games.
It's worthwhile to say too that on Steam it was only $30, which I don't know about y'all, but I feel like $30 for this game is actually a wild steal, because we would have paid $60 for this in 2007 if that's when it came out.
If we're talking price point, I also think it's worth factoring in the length of the game, which for me was like 10 hours or so, and that felt completely fair. We are way past an era where, like, game companies, especially something of the scale of, like, a Bethesda subsidiary, are willing to give us that bite-sized, which, again, 10 hours, bite-sized, scare quotes, experience. I got to play this game over, like, 2 or 3 weeks, just, like, little tiny 2-3 hour sessions, and I also got it on some, like, third-party store or something, like Green Man Gaming, for like $23 or something, so even less. And I was so happy with that. Like, I do wish we had more of these, like, mid-range titles from these companies that clearly have that, like, track record and such. Seeing that talent being, like, sharpened for the sake of a very well-scoped project, I think works really, really well for something like this. I would not have wanted a game that's twice this length, with the same mechanics, same story, same characters.
Did you play it on Steam Deck? Is that kind of what I'm reading?
Oh, no. Weirdly enough,
okay.
For whatever reason, my Steam Deck's been, like, dormant for the last month. I played it on full screen TV. It felt great, and nothing more to say about that.
Did anyone play it on anything but an Xbox Series X or S?
I switched between PC and Xbox Series X. Went back and forth.
Okay.
And just for clarity, since the follow-up question was about, like, console, this was on Steam. Okay.
Let's just talk about what this game is, because we've talked about, kind of, it's a rhythm game, it's an action game. Does somebody want to jump in, maybe Adam, and talk about, like, the core gameplay of this one? Because I think it's really unique.
Yeah, it is an action platformer, 3D action platformer that is completely, everything is to the beat. Or things are better if you go to the beat. You literally jump higher if you jump on beat. You can dash 3 times if you do it on beat. Again, all that adds into the combat adds up and gets better as you go along. I think this game has a really interesting like progression where at the beginning it's like, all right, it hooks you, cool, we're doing a rhythm thing. And also, I love another random point about this game. I love that it wants you to be good at rhythm games even if you're not good, because they're like, follow the beat in the world, you can see things or you can listen, or you can press the button and then a little thing will pop up on the bottom of the screen. And if that's too much, you don't technically have to go on rhythm. The animations will always be on rhythm. So if you redo it again when the animations go, then we'll boost your score. Like, the game just wants you to be good at the game, even if you're not good at rhythm games, which I think is a really cool thing. But yeah, it's an action platformer rhythm game that as you go along, you get a lot more things. You get new moves. You get like special abilities. You get the parry. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Every game put a parry in it. It's wonderful. And it culminates and gets bigger and better. And that's what Hi-Fi Rush is.
It's also worthwhile to note too that there's like some really great accessibility features too, if you are not someone who is able to keep up with the rhythm aspects of it. So you could really play this like an action game. Yeah. The story features food-based characters. Flora, I think you maybe had a question about all the character names before we forget here.
So, yeah, there's a number of characters that are named after food, and I sensed the pattern of that, but in a preparatory discussion we had prior to hitting record here, the supposition was made that all of the characters are food-based. Is that
no? There's a lot
the
of them.
Okay, because
about half of them are food-based.
There's some
the main
like
characters, yeah.
like Korsica. I'm like, I've never heard of that food in my entire life. Is that really a food? I don't want to be culturally insensitive, but like chai, I understand. Like cinnamon and peppermint and such, I get those. But there are some more out of the box ones that did not strike me as obviously food. So it's safe to assume that only a group of them are food based.
Yeah. Well, I have a list. If you guys want me to just say the list that are food.
I'd love the taxonomy here.
Please.
So we have chai, of course. Peppermint. And I never... Is it macaron? Is that how you say the...
macaron?
Macaron. I don't know if it's supposed to be macaroon, or maybe I'm just saying that word
That's like
wrong.
a European
it's a little cookie
word,
things.
so you're forgiven for...
Cinnamon. Then we have mimosa, obviously. Cool drink. And then kale. Those are the ones that I recognize as foods.
Okay.
Specifically.
So there's like Roquefort and like...
Rekka.
Roxanne. Like, I'm sure Roxanne's safe to assume isn't also a food, but...
Yeah.
Okay.
Although I think Korsica is like is a region, so you could then say like your food is like Corsican. So I'm stretching.
That's a reach.
That's a big reach.
Roquefort is a sheep milk from southern France.
They're all food
deep
then.
cut.
So it's all tied together. I
gotta
just
be.
don't have the corkboard of conspiracy theories all attached to each other yet.
He plays Kale. He's a 25-year-old man who...
Chai. Yeah.
Did I say Chai?
What
did I say?
Kale.
Kale. God, Kale is the bad guy. Chai, he's got a dream. He wants to be a rock star. He gets to Vandelay Technologies. He's like, hey, I want to get into Project Armstrong that's going to make me, like, give me cybernetic limbs and is going to make me a rock star. His music player, like his iPod, ends up in the operation somehow, and he then, like, gets his cybernetic arm, but then gets his heart is essentially like his MP3 player, and you're then called a defect, and you then have to just like take down the big regime that is Vandelay Technologies. Is that a fair summation of the plot?
Mm-hmm.
That is precisely...
It's a great setup. Yeah.
Yep.
The voice acting was fantastic, and I think it's one of the things that is underrated in this title. I mean, anywhere Roger Craig Smith is, I want to be.
Yeah. It's that's definitely like the... One of the many things that stood out to me is that this story, like this whole setup, the whole Saturday morning cartoon vibe doesn't work unless you have the right voice actors and the right voice direction and the right script to go along with it. So, and they have like superstars like Robbie Damon is a consummate professional. That dude has been in Persona. That he's voices Shy. Erica Lindbeck voices Peppermint, and who's Futaba in Persona 5. So, and she has like a huge resume on that. And the way they interact between each other is it feels natural. Like the pace of dialogue, the things that they say to each other all feel natural. And that extends to the rest of the cast too. So even the villains, like Roger Craig Smith, the way that he's kind of like this pompous CEO and the way he talks to his other employees, it just has this natural bad guy feel who's has like this real stuck up vibe. It's so good. And in those cutscenes, like the way it feels like real people talking to each other in a way, and it feels like a really high level production and animated production. So that was really impressive. I mean, they have the resources and the right voice actors in place, but they still pulled it off in a way that very few games can. And I think that's one of the biggest factors in endearing me and charming me into this game, is that there's the personalities of these characters are so rich, and that comes through in the voice performances.
I don't know about y'all, but I really wanted an anime of this.
Oh yeah, like a full get Paw Patrol off air. Let's get Hi-Fi Rush the animated series. Come on now.
I will say, give me as much Spider-Verse inspired animation as you possibly can, and I will watch all of it.
Yeah, I think that actually, though I'm very sympathetic with what has just been said about the voice acting, I also think that maybe like the writing didn't work for me in some places because of how quippy it was and how like eager to make jokes it was, and like not necessarily like elaborate jokes, but more just like almost slapstick jokes sometimes, and that's fine. Like, I'm happy this game is silly, I'm happy this game is positive and stuff like that. That's not a sincere critique, but I didn't find myself attached to any of the characters or their voice performances due to the actual lines they were delivering. It was more of just the atmosphere that their quippiness and their relationship, the back and forth kind of high energy banter was giving me. It was more of just like a contextualized sort of character building rather than like a sincere let's learn who these characters are sort of thing. Again, not a real critique. I didn't immediately have the reaction that it seems like y'all had.
Yeah,
it's fair to say though that Chai is just a dumb character.
Yeah,
and, like,
exactly.
a lot of the dialogue is just like, Chai, you're so dumb.
Yeah, that's
I don't know, Michael, if you felt the same way.
That's definitely like that's what they were going for, and they did it extremely well. So you don't necessarily get like deep character development, or you don't get necessarily like, oh my god, like you don't get like not to compare it to Persona because it's a completely different game, obviously, but like you don't get those heartfelt moments where you're like, wow, I really connect with this character. It's more like these are my fun friends who I'm gonna like go out and have a night out with, and you know what I'm saying? Because I mean, there are like some really laugh out loud moments. Like
sure.
Like I think after the Korsica boss fight or whatever.
Yeah.
They're like, what's his face? Kale pulls up in a robot and says, "You're a dumb kid who just swings a guitar around." And then Chai just like, "Yeah, but I'm really good at it." And I just like laughed because it's so silly. Like he knows that he's a dumbass.
Yeah.
But he like leans into it, and even in the Korsica boss fight where he's like, "Oh wow, you're really learning how to talk someone down. You're trying to like defuse the situation," and he screws it all up, and everyone over the voice comms like, "Dawg, come on, man, you were so close."
That's good.
So
stuff,
yeah, it's those cartoony moments that that just it fits the game really well.
One thing we haven't mentioned here yet is the licensed soundtrack. So maybe broadly what I'd love to do is just like talk about the music, because I think both the licensed and the like original tracks are great. Brendan, did you want to jump in first and talk about like how much you loved the music?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not one to shy away from like licensed music in a game, especially when it's done right, but like the original soundtrack to this game, in my opinion, was like the shining star. Like, I know some people love like, oh, 9 Inch Nails first boss fight. I don't know if I'm saying the correct song and or boss fight because I don't care about 9 Inch Nails. I'm sorry, but like those things are cool. I'm glad those like hit with people, but just like being in that world and the world reacting to the music that the game like was built for the game is just like, that's, to me, that is like any game that can accomplish that. I'm 10 million% digging that music even more just because that world is also part of that music. Really good stuff. Like, I listen to that soundtrack like pretty often.
Adam, feel the same way?
Yeah, there are, like I mentioned in the intro, there are two specific tracks that I'm super big fan of, so I hope I'm not taking it away from other people. But the museum level is just Persona 5. I know, Mike, I'm sorry, man. I'm not going to say anymore.
It's all you, man. Go ahead.
I'm not going to say, I'll let you talk about it. It's Persona. And then, but my absolute favorite, probably level, boss, music encounter in the game is Wolfgang Symposium number 5?
His Fifth Symphony, yeah.
Or Fifth Symphony, that's what it is. Oh, man, my favorite boss in the game. And I love how it's like, hey, how about a classical music? And we're just going to have a big, fantastic boss fight over this classical music. And I was like, I mean, that boss fight, again, it's classical music, and you're literally fighting in Scrooge McDuck's pile of gold coins. That works so well, and I adore that stuff. So that's a track that I'll point out that I really like. But again, I don't want to take the other one away from Mike because he's already mentioned this. Go ahead, you talk about it. I'm done.
I mean, you have a Persona 5 tattoo, so I think you need to talk about it.
Yeah, that was wild because it's kind of a meme at this point where you hear like acid jazz or jazz fusion, and everyone automatically thinks, "Oh my god, I'm getting Persona vibes from it." This level was specifically made as an ode to Persona 5. I know for a fact that this was made. Actually, let me back it up.
You're just saying that confidently.
Yeah. I'm
Okay,
saying
okay.
that confidently.
I thought you had some insider industry knowledge, like you had confirmed this.
I'm a DM John Johannes right now and be like,
You
"Yo, is that a
never
Persona
know.
5 reference?" I might. You know what? I might, and I'm gonna do a whole feature piece on that. So I'll be in someone's DMs talking about how that's my next feature. But yeah, it was kind of you're invading a museum, which is just like Madarame in Persona 5. You have that whole sequence where you're on the fighting on the scaffolding, which reminds me of, which is kind of an ode to the opening of Persona 5 and the casino level. And the music itself it's jazz fusion. So you hear the Rhodes piano playing in the background. It has like this up tempo beat behind it that feels exactly like if you take this song and you put it in somewhere in Persona 5, I wouldn't even bat an eye. I'd be like, oh yeah, I remember this song, right? Because it would fit so well, and it has the orchestral strings to back it up, and the funky bass lines and the funky guitar. And then when you get into battle, it evolves to having like distorted guitars, so it's like this punk and jazz fusion mix that fits. Oh my god, it's my favorite track in the whole game. Not just because this sounds like something in Persona that Shoji Meguro made, but it's one of those things that it makes me feel good. Like, yeah, I'm whooping everyone in this arena right now, and I'm doing it to this incredible song. Like, I felt invincible whenever that song played. It's so good, and if it is kind of an ode to Persona 5, Shoji Meguro would be so proud because it is so good. Like, that's the chapter 8 level, and that's when I knew. I put down the controller. I'm like, this is that game.
I absolutely echo the enthusiasm you just expressed about that specific level in particular and that specific music. I also want to maybe give some air to the idea that when y'all are referring to the idea that the soundtrack is something that you listen to in your spare time, I've tried putting it on, but I realized, I think, as I played it, but more so when I put the soundtrack on, that a lot of the songs are either identical tempo or very similar tempo, and so it feels like there's very little variation and there's very little time signature changes for those who are into music theory stuff. Yeah. The songs are all 4/4 from my understanding, and they're all somewhere around the 140 150 BPM sort of target, and that's fine, but those moments that you're speaking about, Michael, I think are super resonant, and I kind of wish there were a few more of those, in terms of if Persona is the comparison, I think one of the reasons that's the comparison is because the dynamism of that music is it really, each individual song has its own identity, and I wish that some of the Hi-Fi Rush songs had a little more of that. And though they do lean on the licensed music element of things, like your Nine Inch Nails, your Black Keys, and so forth, if the OST did that a little more often, I think that this would also be, for me, something that I would be putting on in the background while I read or write or whatever. So
yeah, I say this in my review too, that because it has such high highs with the music, like the Roquefort boss fight. That is a very high. Chapter 8,
Yeah.
the Ode to Persona is such a high that a lot of the soundtrack is good and gets overshadowed in a way that and I feel you on that, because a lot of the original soundtrack is to serve the gameplay, not necessarily stand out on its own, and that's a good thing. But I 1000% like agree with you that on its own, most of the soundtrack is like, oh, this is good, this is cool.
Yeah.
Which
it
is
doesn't
fine.
Interfere.
Yeah, which is
like if
which
it was
is
like
fine.
a 15-16 time signature or something, like I had to like really think about the button press, like I'd be screwed over. Like no.
Yeah.
I'm
y'all
glad
doing
it's
over here?
simple. It does its job, like not getting in your way with difficulty of like adjusting to the new mechanic. But I do think that like at least like a 3-4-4-4 back and forth would be fun. I would love to see.
Yeah,
like,
maybe Hi-Fi Rush 2 could start playing around with them things.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Are you saying that you just can't count out 11-4 just like that?
Some of us
No.
can't.
Yeah, me neither. Mentioning some of the other licensed tracks, so we talked about 9 Inch Nails, A Million by them,
Yeah.
Lonely Boy by the Black Keys, Invaders Must Die by the Prodigy, Whirring by the Joy Formidable, The Perfect Drug by 9 Inch Nails, and Honestly by Zwan, or just, I think there's 9 tracks. That's most of them there. Were there any other, we've talked a little bit about the boss fights. We talked about Roquefort a lot. But are there any other boss fights that like you want to highlight here and just talk about specifically?
The Korsica fight is potentially for me one of the best parts of the game, and that's I feel like the game in a lot of different ways, not just in gameplay or like boss fights. I feel like it definitely takes some interesting swings with how chapters end or how boss fights play out, or just again, even if it's like a cutscene at the end of the chapter. I feel like it always kind of kept me on my toes of like, oh, I gotta, like, I think it's the end of the Korsica fight actually, where you like you can potentially catch her as they are falling, but you can also miss that, like just little weird things like that. Then I'm like, games don't do this anymore. Like I want to do this, like make me do this again in a different game. But that just like not expecting that fight to be like just a duel where you're like like everything about that, and then that kind of comes into the gameplay a little bit more, or actually it might have been throughout her stage where like there are certain enemies where you have to like parry perfectly their like incoming like special attacks. I'm just like I can just picture all this in my head right now. But that boss fight specifically was just a good change of pace. Like it fit the narrative that was going on with like everyone back at HQ, like in the calm. Sorry, whoops.
You're good.
We're doing so well.
I know. Damn. It's sorry.
The story is we started as a PG podcast, so it was like, why stop now? You know what I mean?
So. Anyways, we can edit that out in post, maybe. I don't know. I'm sorry.
We will. It's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah, good boss fight. High point of the game for me.
To bring up more about that boss fight, even the way it started, like it started with like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle style like surfing section. As you like get into that boss fight, you like climb through the ceiling in a very comedic moment where you land on top of Korsica, and then like the like grate comes and smashes her in the head, and you're just like on the ground with 808 in your face, like not knowing what to do. I was laughing out loud during that whole section. So besides the way it started, the dual section where the camera angle also changes, like who put like this game was obviously like had a lot of work put into it. They were working on it for at least I think 4 years. Someone correct me if I'm wrong here, but it shows because there's just so much polish, and like it feels like a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, there's so many one-off things where like they didn't have to do that. There's like here's a goof or a gag that we're going to do in this moment. And I'll remember, like, very memorable, and they'll never do it again. Like catching Korsica in the air, like after the boss fight. It's like, oh, that's like just a one-off thing that they did to fit this moment and just put you in that moment. And it's like, oh yeah, that's goofy. I'm gonna go look up what happens if I don't catch her, and it's goofy in its own way there. But yeah, that was another boss fight where that's actually one of the other few moments where the original soundtrack really really like kicked it up a notch, where
Yeah.
it's like these rising strings of like this metal orchestra, where you could see the equalization bars in the background of it going to the beat as well, and you're doing these parries and dodges, and you're having this intense conversation face to face with her. It's like they built this incredible boss fight where I don't even have to do the stylish action anymore. It's like, oh, this is a rhythm. Now this is a rhythm game. And I mean, to the fact, and we touched on this before, but the fact that every single movement, every single action syncs to the beat, where I'm like tapping my foot, and I'm just kind of sweating, and these orchestral strings and these distorted guitars are just really putting me in this moment. And I'm just like, bam, 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 bam with my parries. I'm like, I felt like a god. Oh my god! It's such a unique feeling, because no other I don't even know. You can count on probably one hand how many games would do this. So yeah, that boss, like, I still think like the Roquefort boss fight. Don't get me wrong, that is an incredible boss fight. Kind of with unexpected aspects to that as well. But the Korsica boss fight for me, like I love rhythm games. So if you make a boss fight that's purely like, hey, play this as a rhythm game, sign me up. Like that was super cool.
I definitely think that there's all of the things y'all just said I agree with. I think that there's the character, is it Zanzo or Zonzo? It's been a minute.
Zonzo, yeah.
Zonzo. So like this is the character I believe that's like you bankrupt them, you have to like defund them.
Yeah.
And I just think that as like a premise of like fighting a boss is really just kind of charming. So for those who haven't played the game yet, which I think we all are giving vibes that you should, the actual boss fight itself is that the boss is throwing intensely and increasingly more expensive diversions at you and obstacles at you. And so, like, every time you beat a wave of what their reinforcements are, it's like, okay, pull out the next round, and then you watch their little funding bar go down instead of, like, a traditional health bar. It's the same thing, but, like, the guise of it being money and this person being just a horrible manager is, I think, just intrinsically funny as a concept. And as a boss fight, I think just executed really well and worked for me at least. And another element of combat that I think is worth throwing in here, since we talked about some of the dynamism within the boss fights and just generally, is we haven't really introduced the fact that secondary characters, so like you have like a party of characters in the game, end up being swappable over a couple command like shifting buttons in combat. So like you have, I mentioned Peppermint earlier. You have like a sidekick character who sort of does a lot of communications for you, and you have this like 808 robot cat thing that's sort of like a medium for this relationship. And you can swap in these characters, sort of like summoning them, I guess, for lack of a better term, to come and do a special move. And depending on the enemies, and they evolve gradually over the course of the game, some will have like a big blue shield around them, and you can just shoot them through with little like peppermint bullets. There's other characters that come through and, you know, throw punches or other sorts of special varieties. And I think that one of the reasons the bosses all worked well for me in this game, and I never felt like I hit a wall or it got stale necessarily, was that each boss incrementally like just required me to like be more fluid with swapping all of those things out. It's not necessarily a deal-breaking requirement. I played on easy. I don't know about any of you all. But I could just kind of punch my way through the shield if I really wanted to. I ended up not doing that because it was more efficient to shoot my way through the shields. But those sorts of things, the game, at least on an easier difficulty, was willing to be forgiving to like a more like, let's say, repetitive play style if I really wanted to do that. And I just thought that sort of like accommodation to the player process was really interesting as far as we're talking about like boss fights and stuff like that.
I thought the side characters also added like a fun amount of comedy, even in the you have essentially a hangout where you can upgrade your chips, and you can, you know, talk to these characters. You can do a training mode. I felt even having each of those characters with their own style. I mean, we've talked a little bit about Cinnamon, who is like a psychology robot who just like draws on his emotions with a Sharpie on his face. Just like perfection. So again, I love how they add to combat, but also like they add a lot of comedy, even the characters that aren't made for comedy. Like Macaron is like a big, like almost looks like a wrestler, but also like the head of R&D. And even though he's not meant to be funny, like when you have a character like Chai who is dumb talk to someone who's incredibly smart, that's just comedy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's if we're gonna talk about like some of the side characters, I think like Chai is fine. Like that template of a character is cool, but what makes him even cooler is the way he bounces off the people around him. So like the way that, because like Macaron being a big softy who. That dude gets like mad emotional and then reminds me of myself. And then there's like some really warm-hearted moments where Chai will say something that is like kind of insightful, and then Macaron will be like, "Oh, Chai, that was really sweet," and it's like, "Oh, that's my guy." And it was like, "Oh yeah, Chai is a cool dude." Like everyone else brings the best out in him, and I think that's an important aspect to the game, because like we got so many quippy protagonists or whatever, some which are okay, some of which are like I don't really care for, so this could have gone away. I could see a version of this game where Chai is just like another one of those. Of course he has his own quirks that I think are cool on their own, but the way Peppermint drives him to be better, and the way Peppermint kind of like is constantly like pushing him in a way, and how like Cinnamon is insightful in that way, and the way Korsica pushes back and lends her own expertise on the situation. And so I think that they just gel extremely well, all their different personalities. You could see like the different personality types in here. It's like, okay, we want this kind of character here, we want this kind of character here, but they all they make each other better. And so there's like some really high highs with some of the moments that they have, and they all make each other better, and that's really, really cool to see.
I think it's a good time to maybe talk about the end of the game. Spoilers if you haven't played Hi-Fi Rush and you want to jump into it. But I find even the way the game ended, like it did the very typical like we're better together kind of ending. But in this game, I was okay with it. I was like, okay, this is exactly what I want from this game. I don't know, Adam, did you kind of feel the same way about the ending?
I mean, yeah, we definitely get that power of friendship moment, which is in all the animes, which is good. I liked it a lot. It's like, oh, okay, Chai's got some depth and some learning here. So I did like that. The moment was really fun, and then it leads into just that crazy, super like probably the hardest fight in the game, going against Kale. But yeah, I like those character moments, and yeah, it gets all like, hey, yeah, we're here with you, we're better together. Like at that point in the game, so the way your partners come in is it's like they basically like I teleport for 3 seconds and I leave. But when you're at that point in the game, they're like, well, no, we're physically here with you for the rest of this journey. So I was a big fan of that, and yeah, I think the ending really hits, especially because you've got the family dynamic. Spoilers that Kale is Peppermint's brother, so we get to have the family thing, the power of friendship. We're all in this together. Fight the big bad guy at the end, who's a robot, and everything ends up for the better. So I really dug the ending of that.
Yeah,
I think the credits. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna agree and say I feel like the ending is like earned. I feel like those character interactions are earned at the end of the game.
And I mean, you get that beautiful credit sequence at the end that just like is pure joy, and like almost a payoff for 10 hours of playing.
Yeah, it's like I never thought I'd shed a tear to a Swan song, like. My bad.
I'm not the only one.
Y'all was gonna get me at some point, man. That moment was I just got mad emotional over it, because it's like, oh, I love these characters. They're my friends, and then they save the day. And the fact that it leans into like it can do like a lot of stories work off the same template. It's like, okay, all the characters are going to band together at the end. They're going to defeat the bad guy. And everything's going to be great. Like, it's how many stories do that? It's the way in which you do it. So the way in which this, like, the way it built into that moment, like that last chapter where they break through the window, they're all jumping together, the smoke clears and the camera pans, like, oh, that's my squad. That's how I felt so empowered by that. Like, all these are my people. And then the way in which you go through that level and each character does their thing to help you advance, it's like, oh, thank you, you got my back. That felt incredible. And the moment in which it switched you to 808 to jump over those the firewalls, whatever, to like save the day and then like cap everything off. Oh, again, that's another one of those one-off moments that the game does. I will always remember that moment. That brief, like 2 minutes I got to control 808. I will never forget that. That is one of the highest highs. And you never have to do that in any other part of the game. Yeah. That was incredibly well. The Kale boss fight was pretty tough, and it forced you to use the different characters and use their different powers. So I always like it when games like throw in all these different mechanics and they present you with ways where you have to use them. You have to understand how to use them. So that was really cool. And just like, you know, the Korsica and Peppermint shippers out there, y'all are eating good with that ending. You know what I'm saying? My suspicions were confirmed, and I loved. I was like, oh my god, these two characters I love. So I love Korsica. I love Peppermint. Peppermint is probably my favorite character of the year so far.
Dang, lovely!
Yeah,
I
my
love
favorite
that.
new character. Yeah, Peppermint. Like, and like her mom. Her mom is Indian, and so like South Asian representation right there, just straight up, like very natural way. It's just like, oh yeah, Peppermint is part, or she's Indian, like Indian American, or it would seem like, you know, having Erica Lindbeck voice her as an American voice actress. So it's like, oh, Peppermint's one of my people. It's just really cool. That how that all came together, because you don't ever interact with Peppermint's mom until the very end. Mm-hmm. So there's all these small moments that just come together in like the last two chapters that, like, oh my god, all these pieces are falling into place. Wow, I didn't know Hi-Fi Rush had this in it. Just an incredible ending on so many fronts. Not just in that incredible we all banded together and beat the bad guy moment. It's like all the little things that it reveals to you is like, wow, y'all really did this.
Because it's not about, the thing we have not said one time is that this whole game is about, like, Kale wants to, like, have an AI control everyone who has these cybernetic enhancements.
Yeah.
We've not said those words one time
for, like,
because Hi-Fi Rush is not about that. It's not about the journey. It's not about the story. It's about the journey that you had with your friends along the way.
Yes.
Hey.
Did anyone play this game after they rolled credits? Because I know that it's maybe like a 10-hour game, but there's like significant after credits content that you can jump into. Show of hands, who did it?
A little bit, not a lot.
Okay. I didn't, so I don't know. Brendan, do you maybe want to start and talk about the little bit that you touched?
Well, the first thing I did was like I just unlocked a bunch of costumes and like things. Let me dress my gang up real quick because we're going back into these levels looking good. So there's that. There's like I think there's just a straight up arcade mode that you can play through everything and like with like stakes there, and then I think there's also a boss rush mode. I don't know if there's additional stuff outside of those. Those are the things that I kind of played around with a little bit after.
I think that's most of it. Then there's like you can go back into the levels and get all the collectibles, right?
And there's those things as well. Yeah, because that's the other thing that we didn't really touch on is like when you start unlocking more of these party members, obviously you get to use them in combat scenarios, but getting them allows you to then reach areas in previous levels that you couldn't access before because you didn't have, you know, Korsica's wind ability. I don't remember apparently. Stuff like that. So it kind of gives you just a innate, I can go back and do things I couldn't do before now. Yeah.
There are special doors in each level that you can go back and hit. And they have, you go into them and they're kind of like combat challenges. Like, okay, that's cool. But if you complete all of them, you get an additional cutscene. That's actually pretty cool. Yeah.
Okay.
Some of the later challenges are pretty difficult. Like, maybe I wouldn't say in a fair, challenging way. Some of them are kind of annoying to do. But if you do complete all those different challenges, if you find the doors throughout the levels, and you can do the chapter select, and it will tell you which chapters have that door and whether or not you found it or not. So it's pretty easy to discover. But the room challenges are they can get tough, but if you do all of them, you're treated to something a little extra at the end.
Sounds like a
wanna give a little
YouTube journey
teaser?
for me.
Little teaser for us. Tease us a little bit.
Yeah,
Michael.
it's just like a little post-credit cutscene where you think you're doing something, and then they're like, "Haha, we tricked you into doing this," and then actually you're not. It doesn't necessarily lead to anything like revelatory, but it is a cute little like post-credit scene, if you will.
We've talked a lot about Hi-Fi Rush, but like this game's only 10 hours. I'd love to know from y'all maybe some suggestions if people are like, hey, I love Hi-Fi Rush and I want to play more games like it. Can you give any suggestions of titles that folks should jump into like right after Hi-Fi Rush?
I want to interrupt you because we're going to get
please.
off Hi-Fi Rush. We didn't mention it. Jacob, I was waiting for you to do it, and you didn't. I'm very upset with you. You didn't mention that one of the bosses in this game, her name's Rekka. She's
yeah,
a
the
wrestler.
wrestling boss.
There's a big wrestling lady.
Come on, Jacob.
Come on,
yeah,
Jacob.
big wrestling lady. How did I not do this?
Wonderful.
I don't know.
She's great. Wonderful.
Yeah, she's has like a wrestling title around her waist and everything, and like clearly has different influences from like luchador and man.
She's doing like the
I
whole
can't believe
Hulk Hogan bit.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that.
Yeah,
what am I doing?
Oh,
That's
I'm a
it.
wrestling guy.
That's all I had to
Can't believe
say.
it.
Can't believe it.
Hey, that's a good call,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah,
That was
real
the
bad.
equivalent to you also swearing on the show. So we did it. We got 3 out of 5.
Yeah. Should I just swear and huff? There, I did it. I did a swear.
Whoa!
Yeah,
Wholesome
I did a
Jacob, your
swear.
title has been revoked.
Yeah.
All right, it's up to me. I'm carrying
Yeah.
the remainder of the podcast to the credits.
Oh,
Listen,
I want to say one quick more thing about the game before we move on, because I don't think the game explains it at all, and it like doesn't need to be this big thing. And I didn't take it as a big thing, but I just appreciated like the design choice of this. Like I think the world is very interesting, has great settings, environments, and the characters are like all the main cast are like very cool designs, and like just I really vibe with a lot of these character designs, but specifically with like Chai and Peppermint. The fact that like a lot of the other characters have these like what cybernetic or whatever they are like enhancements over their body, but Chai does not have an arm, and Peppermint does not have a right leg. So it's like not enhancements over their skin. It's like they have these body parts that are like not their traditional body, and I appreciate that because like you don't see that a lot in games where like and I don't know if that's what they're going for with those character designs, but the fact that like 2 of the main characters, one doesn't have an arm and the other one doesn't have a leg, I think is cool to see and important for representation. So
yeah, I loved the like potential analog of disability representation in that, especially the main character here, but also like the world and the fact that the character, though empowered by this seeming disability, is in fact labeled as like a defect by the sort of machine and the organization. I think that tension is really interesting and how that potentially resolves over the course of the story. So I'm so glad you spoke to that.
Yeah.
Go
go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
I was just saying, like, I appreciate that, like, the game doesn't overtly say that. Like, it is there if you want to explore that yourself and like think about that. And for most people, it's probably never going to cross their mind. Cool guy, robot arm. Cool girl, robot leg.
Flying
and
V.
And that's fine too. Like, if that's how you are, cool. But like, also, I just appreciate that it's there without having to be like, guess what? We have you know what I mean? Like, there's
it's not
something
trying to moralize.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's sending a message, but without explicitly like bold texting you what the message is.
Yeah, and like the overall theme of this corporation wants to eradicate defects, and you and your crew just be like, no man, that's not cool, and then you just fight, and like it's very simple. It's just a very simple thing that anyone can get behind. But when they use that as a base, it's like, oh wow, yeah, that is a cool thing that I can definitely get behind. And the way in which this game paints Vandelay as a corporation in very small ways, when you interact with the different robots who are working around for the company, they speak to so many. It's a parody on like
on corporate America.
Yeah, on modern work culture, and it's funny and it's goofy. because it's relatable, because we all know these things, and they say it very plainly, and it's really funny to see these robots have like these revelations about, like, wow, they're really overworking me. Damn, I need to reroute my CPU, my percentage of my CPU to my hands because I can't type code fast enough. It's a really funny parody that uses really simple ideas to really send a strong message to where, like, and again, it's not like this it's not this overt message like, yeah, we need to overthrow corporations, like, which is true, but the way they do it in goofy small ways is, it's like, oh wow, like that's a nice thing, in addition to really build out this world and really make it clear what you're trying to say without overtly saying it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you just spoke to all of those things, because that was going to be my sort of like last words, final remark, is like how funny this game is and how smart this game is and how those things intersect so often. Like my little like tagline, "Hello, I'm here on the podcast" thing at the beginning was about the pigeons being the source of the little cleaner robots' discontent. Like those there's these dinky little robots in this game that you can just beat the crap out of until they die. And like, why would you do it? Because they plead for help and they run away and stuff. But I was inclined to do it every single time. I don't know why. And they say these pitiful, awful things that make you feel horrible. And yet, if you're going for as many of these, like, I think the game's currency is like gears or whatever. These little parts that you get to like upgrade and add abilities to your character. That sort of stuff got me. And there's dumb jokes throughout this game too that are like entirely self-aware of itself as a medium, like, just to speak to how funny this game is. There's like a sort of, I don't know what to call them. They're like almost vending machine / refrigerator robots that like give you a tutorial after you've learned the thing. Which I never quite understood. Maybe the higher difficulties don't give you the initial tutorial or something. But, like, they'll say things like, is that another bracket, all caps, foreign existence, close caps, or, like, whatever, like, that I see there. Like, there's just, like, funny little, like, AI things. And y'all mentioned, like, focusing all your CPU on things. And there was one more that I had, and it was something like... There's a sort of like gender non-conforming robot that falls in love with one of the cleaning robots, and they find each other like lovingly in this like forested area. And I have the screenshot in front of me now. The robot's name is OL-404, and it says, "Oh, but our love is forbidden, prohibited by our terms of service." Like there's so much stuff like that in this game. Like you end up like dressed up like a hammerhead shark, shot onto stage at some point. Like this game, it's so it's earnest.
We haven't even talked about the emails either. Like there are emails that like even one or two of those gave me a chuckle. So like
there was like that detective like hidden too. Like I don't know if any, like I was seeking that.
The like
or something.
Mini sub story things. Yeah,
I forget what that character's name was.
I also do.
Yeah, and you could find there's other like y'all said that there's areas of levels you can reach in the post game. Yeah. And there's more to that character when you discover those areas. There's so many funny goofs and gags. Like it's funny and it's very smart. It's like it feels effortless because it all just flows together. It's so well.
Okay, look, we're all really excited about Hi-Fi Rush. So like let's give to close out like 5 recommendations of, let's even expand it to like albums or anime or games that you're like, if you like Hi-Fi Rush, you need to go and do this. I can go first because I'm ready. I have not played No More Heroes, but No More Heroes is on my pile of shame. It is not one of the games that I'm committing to playing this year, Michael, because I know that you've committed to play some games this year, I think.
Yes, I have.
But it is a game that I bought on Switch and I just need to play. Yeah. So No More Heroes is the thing that I'm going to recommend, because even though I've not played it, it seems like a thing that could be analogous to Hi-Fi Rush. Maybe a little bit more not as smart, but still seems like the vibes may be similar.
Bayonetta Origins is pretty cool, and I feel like there's a lot of similarities, and not necessarily in tone, but I think that if you're looking for something charming and endearing in the action space that also kind of uses rhythm elements in it, Bayonetta Origins is really, really cool. Switch exclusive, but and I coming off of Hi-Fi Rush, I was like kind of itching for another action game, which I played Final Fantasy 16, and honestly, it's a stylish action game in the same way that DMC, Bayonetta, and Hi-Fi Rush has like drawn from as well. And when y'all mentioned swapping between the different characters for special abilities, it reminded me like, oh, Clive in Final Fantasy 16 switching between summons for different abilities. Like, yeah, of course, this is stylish action. It's doing this too in a completely different context. So I would either recommend Final Fantasy 16 when it comes out in June, or Bayonetta Origins, Switch exclusive that is extremely charming, so adorable, so cute, that'll win your heart over, that still has like a similar element of that action that I think you might... It's similar to Hi-Fi Rush.
Flora, you're next.
For clarity here, you said like we would give 5. Did you mean individually
Oh,
5?
individually, one each.
Okay.
But if you have one or two, throw them in.
I
Guys,
wrote
I'm
down
not
a
that
list of, like,
crazy.
8.
I promise, I'm not that crazy.
I'll bullet point this as much as possible. I feel like an obvious like next step if you like this game is check out Unbeatable, which is a game that isn't even out yet. It's like a little rhythm game that has a couple songs attached to it. It has an anime aesthetic, and it's a rhythm game that's very much Guitar Hero-ish. There's really only 2 sort of like beat inputs in the game, and the full thing should be coming out soon. So it's free. So, like that's like there's kind of no excuse if you like rhythm games, if you like this sort of like anime, sort of like over the top, everything syncs up sort of thing. Also, anime just in general, I feel like FLCL and Bocce the Rock would be 2 really good, like just poke in both of those directions. Similar reasons, they're like one is musical focused, one has music integrated so tightly with its very short narrative that I think that both could be enjoyable as like extensions. If you want a video game that does something like mechanically similar, Metal Hellsinger, which I already mentioned, like you literally shoot to the beat in a first person shooter in like hell, and as you rack up a combo of like successive shots, the layers of music go from like drum and bass to like rhythm guitar, lead guitar, vocals, harmonies. It stacks up in a way that y'all kind of mentioned, like some chorus, like boss fights stack up in a way. And then just like spitballing here, Ratchet and Clank. I'm a big 3D platformer from like the early 2000s fan. Like Jak and Daxter is one of my favorite games of all time, but I feel like this is actually closer to a Ratchet and Clank than it is a Jak and Daxter. And so like if you liked that, and then finally, and I'll shut up, Scott Pilgrim. Weirdly enough. I know that Jacob knows Scott Pilgrim really well, but I feel like idiot protagonist, check. Music, check. Anime video game thing going on that like all integrates together somehow and is like you can't really pull one apart without de-raveling everything else. So yeah, that's like 14 recommendations, but there you go.
Hi-Fi Rush was heavily inspired by Scott Pilgrim.
I am so sorry to anyone else who might have been going for those examples.
You did 5. Well done. Brendan, do you want to go next?
All right, I'll this is a disaster. I'm sorry.
You got
When
5.
you said 5, I was like racking my brain. I have notebook out. I'm like, okay,
Just
right,
one.
right.
I went way above.
1 for 5 of us. Sorry, Brendan.
I'm
No, it's
enthusiastic.
totally
about this
fine. So here's how I'll break it down, and I'll be quick. So there's layers here. So straight up rhythm game, non-traditional. So like removing like classic instrument games. I'm gonna have to say Rhythm Heaven. But that's hard to play at this point if you don't have a DS or if you don't have a Wii, and those games are probably expensive. So that might be a little tough to play in a legal fashion. So highly recommend. Those games are like phenomenal rhythm games, and they have so much charm and humor baked into how those games present themselves. So like if you want like a very unique rhythm experience that is also charming and funny, there you go. Cadence of Hyrule, another game I already brought up, / Crypt of the Necrodancer. Amazing top-down 2D rhythm-based gameplay. Cadence of Hyrule is a little bit more accessible. You can definitely... There are settings, and I don't know if they've added settings to Crypt of the Necrodancer to like be a little more accessible, but Cadence of Hyrule, you can literally turn it off like you can in Hi-Fi Rush. So if you're bad at rhythm games, but you like that kind of gameplay, it's a little bit of a different of a game, but it does it a little more accessible. But Cadence of Hyrule, phenomenal. It was also brought up in the show, but this game is so important to me, so I have to bring it up again. Sayonara Wild Hearts is a game that like changed my life. I think that there are very few games that the music within them hit me as hard as that game did. It's a very simple game as far as the gameplay standpoint. So I firmly believe like pretty much anybody can play that game regardless of your skill level. Phenomenal game. And then another game that's like kind of puts itself in the Rhythm Heaven category of like hard to play or like not available or easily accessible is that Pistol Whip, which is a VR game. It is. I play a lot of VR, so I wanted to shout a rhythm game out in that space, which it basically you're on rails and you are shooting enemies to the music, and the nature of the game being a VR experience, so you're in that experience. Like I find myself dancing while I'm playing. Like I am dancing with the music and not just like shooting to the music, and it's just like it's a full body experience. I love Pistol Whip. And the last thing, which is not a rhythm game.
Wow, you did 5.
I did?
We went the full field goal here.
Hey.
Let's go.
No, I did. Oh, I did 5. Yeah, sorry. I thought you said I already did 5. I was like, no, I don't want to do 6. So
This makes me so happy.
the last thing that I'll say is not a rhythm game. But if you want like feel good vibes, sort of, maybe not every story beat, but you want like a good cast of characters that you're going to learn to grow and love and just have a great journey with. You want a good journey? Yakuza Like a Dragon.
Yes, sir.
And I'll just say that. Yakuza Like a Dragon was my first Yakuza game. That cast of characters, Ichiban, oh man, a much more, it's an RPG, it's a long game, it's a lot more character development than Hi-Fi Rush. There's a lot more going on, more story beats. I mean, there are rhythm aspects. You can go do karaoke. I'm sure some of the many other mini games in there have rhythm aspects to them. But Yakuza Like a Dragon, phenomenal story, phenomenal cast, and I think if you like some of the charm and wittiness to the dialogue and characters here, I think you're gonna love even more of that when it comes to something like a Dragon.
Oh, Brenden, every time I think about Ichiban, I cry.
Same. Yeah.
I need an excuse to replay. I need an excuse to replay that game.
And now we have one.
Mm-hmm.
Adam, you were last.
All
Give
right.
us your recos.
Yeah. I got one game and one other thing that's similar. All right. So the game Doom Eternal, I mentioned at the beginning,
Yep.
where if you want a game that feels good and like has a pace and a rhythm to movement, Doom Eternal, not a rhythm game, but it definitely has a cadence of like, you got to be moving, you got to do this, you got to use a chainsaw, It's similar. It's not a rhythm game specifically, but it does feel similar. And I just played Doom Eternal. That's why I'm thinking about it. It's on my brain.
Yeah.
But the main thing is, and I can only think of 2 other things that do this, but it's animation style. So I'm right here looking at an article on Vulture when they did Spider-Verse, where it animates, on first, it doesn't always animate on the same amount of frames. So sometimes it's 1 frame, 2 frames, 3 frames. Like that's where you get like the jittery, like things don't look perfectly. It looks like what you assume a comic book would look like, and this game does that very specifically. Again, if you've seen Spider-Verse, you know what I'm talking about, but it doesn't animate always on the same frames. It changes it to make it look different. This game does that. And also, whenever that movie comes out, the new Ninja Turtles movie also looks like a similar art style. So watch Spider-Verse because, first of all, it's great.
Yes.
Maybe watch Ninja Turtles because I like Ninja Turtles, but it's
Is that the new one that Seth Rogen is doing?
Yeah, it's
is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mutant Mayhem, I believe it's called. So those are 2 things right now that I can think of that, again, Hi-Fi Rush is the exact same art style. It even has the little Kirby dots in the corners sometimes. You'll notice like little dots inside of stuff. So yeah, if you want something that's like a jittery, cartoony style, Spider-Verse and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I feel like that's a plug for Cutscenes, a video game movie podcast right there.
There you go.
Yeah. I might host another podcast about video game movies and TV that I'll tell you about in a second. But I'll tell you about the end of the show first. Thanks all for coming on to talk about Hi-Fi Rush. It's a great game, and folks now have a great list of media that they can go jump into after they played Hi-Fi Rush. So what I'd love to do is, for our 3 guests, I'd love for you to tell folks where you can be found and what you're working on. I'm going to start first with Adam. Adam, where can you be found? Tell us about the Isle of Misfit Rolls and Respawn Aim Fire.
Yep. Isle of Misfit Rolls is a live stream and just a podcast it's a D&D campaign where we play The bad guys. We used to say it's like Suicide Squad if it was good, but then James Gunn movie came out, so I can't really say that anymore. But I'll miss the roles, play bad guys, D&D, it's a good time. And then Respawn Aim Fire is a gaming podcast where we talk about news, but we also have a lot of weird, silly segments, play games, do backlog reviews and stuff like that. So Respawn Aim Fire and Isle of Misfit Rolls are the two things that I do.
And where can be found on the internet?
At Adam Gumbert on Twitter is the only place. Don't have Instagram. Don't have Facebook. Just find me on Twitter. Don't even bother looking for me. I'm not there.
Are you on Hive? Are you on Blue Sky? Tell us.
do have a Hive.
Ooh, nobody uses that anymore.
I haven't loaded up in a couple months, but I got it. It's still Adam Gumbert, though. It's all there.
Awesome. Brendan, where can you be found?
I can
Tell us about Pass the Controller as well.
Yeah, sure. That thing.
You just hit 360. Come on now. You're an Xbox
360.
now.
We are an Xbox. So this past episode 360, the plan was like, oh yeah, let's just reminisce about the 360. It's a great generation of consoles, a lot of good games, blah blah blah. It was a disaster. We barely talked about that. It went off the rails, which what happens. But yeah, I host a weekly show called Pass the Controller Podcast. We talk about everything under the video game sun, nerd culture. We stay relevant. We don't try to cover every news beat that's happening because we can't. I mean, you're not coming to us for that. You're going to the other, outlets in the world for those things. So we try to have, honest conversations about the things that we care about, so we can give actual input. And we have, amazing guests on from time to time. You were on, Jacob, for Kirby 30th?
Yeah, I did the Kirby retrospective.
Yeah. I forget, 30th, 35? I don't remember anymore. Kirby's old. We're all old. I'm old. Maybe just me. But yeah, we do a weekly show, talk about a bunch of stuff. I write stuff. I do other things. You can find all those things at passthecontroller.io. You can find me at bgroom. You can find Pass the Controller at Pass Controller.
Love it. Thank you for coming.
Oh, and
and
for having
Michael,
me always.
Where can you be found?
You could find me and all my stuff at Michael P. Higham on Twitter, and I am now currently a freelance writer, editor, video host, and you could find a lot of my stuff on IGN, GameSpot, Polygon, Ars Technicas, where I did my Final Fantasy 16 preview. I also did stuff with Kind of Funny, so I also did my video preview for Final Fantasy 16 on Kind of Funny. And I got some things still lined up with those sites as well, so pay attention to what I'm doing if you want to keep up with a bunch of games. So, yeah, I'm out here doing it, man.
You're at Michael P. Higham on Twitter, right?
Yes.
What's the P stand for?
The P stands for Pino. Let's go.
There it is. There it is. And for Flora, which you'll intro yourself in a second, but Michael, Brendan, Flora, myself, we're all going to be at PAX East, right?
Yes. Let's kick it.
What are you doing? Sorry, Adam. What are you all doing at PAX East? Any panels that people should look out for?
Ooh. I am on Axe of the Blood God panel with the homies Kat Bailey, news editor IGN, Nadia Oxford, Eric Van Allen from Destructoid. One other person I can't name. I'm so sorry I forgot. But yeah, we're gonna do a RPG draft. We're going to try to Frankenstein our greatest RPG by pulling elements from different games. It's going to be wild. It's going to be cool. It's going to be fun. But I'm also going to be doing some on-the-ground coverage for some various sites. So I'm going to be out there. PAX East, baby.
And what day, what time is that panel? Do you know?
Saturday at 4:30. I think it's 4:30 Eastern. So, yeah.
And for Brendan and Flora, you're going to be on the video game trivia panel. That is on Friday at 7:30 in the Bobcat? Condor, thank you. In Condor. And you'll be there, sweet. Yes. And then we've got another panel about why the GameCube is the best console ever made. That features Janet Garcia. That features, I'm missing
Cam
more
Hawkins
people.
is on that?
Cam Hawkins, Matt Storm, Asa Green River, and
hell yeah.
And I'm missing one more. But you can find that one at 12 o'clock in Dragonfly and on Twitch/PAX3.
Oh, I'm so excited to see y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. My very first PAX. I'm nervous and excited in equal measure, but mostly in my heart, excited.
Mike Towndrow, that's the other person. Mike Towndrow, I'm so sorry.
Hey.
Mike.
Flora, where can you be found on the internet?
You can find my written work at epiloguegaming.com. I most recently published a sort of deep dive on Plague Tale Requiem, which is a little long overdue. I feel like I'm about to publish an episode on like a plant dating simulator from Kinder Worlds, which is absurd but delightful, and other stuff coming in the pipeline. You can find me on Twitter at LudoNarrativeFM, and of course the Left Behind Game Club Discord.
Cool. And you can find me at Jacob McCourt on all major social media platforms. JACOBMCCOURT. I host another podcast called Cutscenes. It's about video game, movie, and TV. We just finished our season about The Last of Us. Hey, like everyone else, we did a Last of Us recap show. You can find that on all major podcasting platforms. And you can find all things Left Behind Game Club at Left Behind Club on Twitter and Left Behind Game Left Behind Game Club on Instagram. And we're going to close the show there by saying shout out Mike Ruffalo, and that, my friends, is one less game left behind.